It's really a real joy and a privilege for me to be here. Brother Richard Cook invited me, and you know, it's very hard for me to say no to Richard, not because of Richard, but because of his wife, Claudette. And you just heard that Beverly and myself, unfortunately Beverly is not here this morning. She some time ago had major surgery, and she's very concerned about going out too often, especially, and you can well understand. But this year, on July 12th, Beverly and myself celebrated 49 years of marriage. And a friend of hers said to her, "So Beverly, what are you going to give Barry for being married to you for 49 years?" She said, "I'm going to take him to London." So the friend says, "If you're going to take him to London for the 49th, what are you going to do for the 50th? She says, "I'm going to go back and get him." Thank you. One of the challenges we have in our country, our beloved country, Jamaica, is the fact that we are, I'm trying to get this light on, but it's, okay. We are having serious problems with families. And you know, as someone who really is committed to what the scripture teaches, I reflected a little on marriage, because the truth is that in Jamaica, we don't have a lot of people getting married. And because of our history of slavery, we have had real challenges with family life. I don't know how many of you know this, but Jamaica has the highest rate of children being born out of wedlock in the world. It is 86%, and that's very, very high. And we've tried to understand a lot, and we recognize that there's absolutely no doubt about it. Slavery has contributed tremendously to our challenges with family life. But you know, one of the great concerns we have had is that when we think about marriage, the person who originated it, the person who created it, the person who made it possible, who also gave us a plan, who gave us a guide, is our Lord Jesus Christ, is God. And somehow our departation from what he has given to us is what has caused tremendous challenges for us. If we look at the last two verses of Genesis chapter 2, we will discover that in these last two verses, thank you very much, that God has given us a plan, an outline as to how we should have the foundation for healthy families. And somehow we have not followed the plan. And so I want us to just reflect on it a little. The last two verses of Genesis chapter 2. Genesis 2:24 to 25. It says, "For this cause a man shall leave his mother and father." And I would like to suggest to you that this suggests severance. That it is important when someone gets married that they leave their parents. It is not asking you to abandon your parents. What it is asking you is to make a shift in loyalty. When you were with your parents, they were your primary, you were loyal to them. They were your primary support group. They were the ones who, in terms of priority, they were your number one priority. But when you move into marriage, there's a shift. And that shift makes your spouse your number one priority, your primary priority, and your parents your secondary priority. And so it's severance. And then it says, and they shall become one flesh, which suggests unity. It is suggesting that these two people are coming together to become one. They're no longer two, but they're one. So it's not longer I and you and she, or he and she. It's now we and us. They're now one. And then it goes on to say, and they shall become, sorry, I missed out this one. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, which suggests severance, and shall cleave to his wife, which suggests permanence. I want you to hear me say that marriage is a permanent relationship. The only relationship in this world that's permanent is a husband and wife relationship. A parent-child relationship is not permanent, it is temporary. Because as parents, we must give our children roots and then we give them wings and allow them to fly and fly away. And then the passage continues and it says, and they shall become one flesh, which suggests unity. It suggests that a husband and wife now comes together and they are now one. So it is not he and she, it is me, it is us, it is we. And then the passage goes on to say, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed, which suggests sexual intimacy. And so what this suggests is that when a man marries a woman, when a husband and wife has sexual intimacy, sexual intercourse, there's absolutely no shame. They don't have to hide. They don't have to try to make sure that nobody knows about it, because it is part of God's plan and program. But what has happened in our country? What has happened in our country is that instead of starting at 1 and then going to 2 and then going to 3 and then 4, we're finding most of our people starting at 4. And having started at 4, they have real difficulties now, because then they now try to get to 1, 2, and 3, and it becomes a real problem. It becomes totally dysfunctional. And this dysfunctionality has created all kinds of challenges in our country and in our families. And my brothers and my sisters, I want us to understand that unless we stick with God's program and God's plan, we will continue to be in all kinds of trouble in our country. Frequently, when a man and a woman marries, they have all kinds of great ideas. And it is two coming together. It's like two rivers merging. But you know, merging is not the most easiest of things. It's very problematic. It's very difficult. Because as husbands and wives try to merge their lives together, they find that they experience all kinds of challenges. And these challenges cause them quite often to end up having problems, numerous problems. We find Proverbs 18:22 encouraging a couple to really be committed to their partners in their marriage. Hebrews 13:4 talks about the importance of the bed. But I would also like to suggest to you that marriages are not always smooth and easy. There are quite often many, many problems surrounding these marriages. And what I'd like to share this morning is the fact that quite often we have all kinds of conflicts and difficulties in marriages. And we're deeply concerned about the high rate of divorce taking place in Jamaica. And so we want to take a look this morning as to what contributes to this. What is it that is causing so many marriages to fail? And I would like to suggest that there are several reasons. One, faulty communication, which we're going to be looking at. Then there is immaturity, which we're going to be looking at. Then there's failure to take marriages seriously, which we're going to be looking at. And there's unhealthy need fulfillment. First, let us look at faulty communication. Most of you will know that communication is not just what is said, it's what's heard and understood. And quite often in a marriage, in a relationship, we find that the communication is faulty because what is said is not what the other person hears. For instance, a wife says to her husband, "Darling, come here." And what he hears is, "Come here, boy." But that's not what she said. But guess what? That's what his mother used to say to him. And so he's quite upset. He says to her, "Oh, we are called boy." And all kinds of challenges face this couple now. Because what he heard was not what she said. And so she says to him, "Honey, can you tell me what you heard?" And when he tells her what he heard, she is shocked because that's not what she said. What she said, and she now says to him, she said, "I said, darling, come here. But you heard, boy, come here, boy." That's not what I said. What is the problem here? The problem is that the message sent was not the message received. And that causes many, many problems in marriage. And so we find faulty communication is a major, major reason why many marriages are failing and have failed. Then there is immaturity. I would like to suggest to you that marriage is not for children. Marriage is for adults. Do you know you could have a person who is 30 years old chronologically, but 14 emotionally? And so sometimes we have these emotionally youngsters who might be might be 30 and even 40 getting married. And we can't understand how come they have so much problem. You know why they're having the problems? They're having the problems because marriage is not for children. So for instance, a young lady who had no father at all, she grew up in Jamaica with no dad, and now she gets married to a guy who's probably 10 years older than her, 5 years older than her. And what she is seeking in this relationship is a dad, is a father. And what he is discovering is that because she's seeking a father from him, the relationship feels incestuous sometimes. And so it becomes a real problem because she wants a father in her husband, but he wants a wife, not a child. And so that becomes problematic. Or a man whose mother took care of everything for him. She virtually spoiled him. She picked up his clothes, she did this, she did that. She just did everything. He did absolutely nothing at home. He now gets married to a lovely lady and expects her to treat him like his mother did. And so it is so frustrating for her because she now discovers that not only does she not have a husband, but she has a son that she never planned for. She's picking up after him. She's doing this for him. She's doing that for him. He is so helpless. And that becomes quite frustrating because you know what? Marriage is not for children. It's for adults. So immaturity causes many of our marriages to be in serious, serious trouble. The third reason why many marriages are failing is because of the failure to take marriage seriously. The failure to take marriage seriously. In Jamaica, there are three perspectives on marriage. There are some people who see marriage as a romantic partnership, and so it's about romance. And so it's not uncommon to hear somebody say, "I love him, but I'm no longer in love with him." Or, "I love her, but I'm no longer in love with her." What do you think they're talking about? They're talking about the chemistry. They're saying, "Boy, you know, things are not what it used to be, and there's no chemistry." It's the romance. And worse, they've been watching soap operas. And if you watch soap operas, you're going to discover that soap operas are about the romance. It's about romance. And so as a result, when you watch soap operas and you see the soap operas being acting out in the lives of many of our people, even in the church, you find that people are changing partners. They're getting married and then divorcing and getting married again and then divorcing because they're constantly trying to make sure that the romance. But you know, the truth is that romance is fickle. You might feel romantic today, you might not feel romantic tomorrow. You might have heard my friend Winston speak about the lady who married several times. The first person she married was a banker. The second person she married was an actor. The third person she married was a preacher man. And the fourth person she married was an undertaker. And so she was asked, how come you got married so often in that order? She says, 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go. She's really trying to find that romantic partner. She's trying to maintain. And so every time it fails, she finds somebody else who would be romantic. And so there are folks who see marriage as a romantic relationship. It's a romantic partnership. And this marriage can only be sustained and maintained by the romance. And so because romance is fickle, we find quite often many are ending it and getting married several times. Then there are those who see marriage as a contractual partnership. And so you marry someone because he has something that you like and you would like, and you have something that he likes. And so that contractual situation takes place. One of the challenges we have in Jamaica is quite often a person will go and a man will say to his wife, for instance, hey, darling, I would like to become a U.S. citizen. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to divorce you. I'm going to get married to a U.S. citizen. When I get my green card and then my citizenship, I'll divorce the person and come back and marry you. By the way, that never happens. And so we see that kind of thing taking place in Jamaica, where people marry someone because they have something that they need. The problem is, what happens when you no longer need that, but you need something else, and your partner doesn't have it? And so we see many divorces taking place because of that. I would like to suggest that there's a third perspective on marriage, and that is marriage as a covenant. Marriage as a covenant. And that's what the Bible promotes, that's what the Bible teaches, and that's what the Bible encourages. And I would like to say that there are 3 very important things about covenants. Marriage as a covenant sees marriage as a permanent relationship. When God brought Adam and Eve together, God didn't say to Adam, Adam, if Eve doesn't work out, I will give you Yvette. He never did that. He meant for Adam to stay with Eve until death. Marriage is a permanent relationship. A permanent relationship. But not only is marriage a permanent relationship from a covenantal point of view, marriage can experience harmony. Marriage can become a harmonious partnership. But in order for harmony to take place, there need to be mutual love and mutual submission. The Bible says, husbands, love your wives. But love involves submission. The Bible says, wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord, but a wife submit because of love. And so when you have mutual love and mutual submission, you are likely to experience some amount of harmony in a relationship. The third perspective of covenant is that marriage is a spiritual companionship. There are 3 persons in a marriage. There's God, there's the husband, and there's the wife. And so marriage then looks like a triangle, where God is at the apex, the husband is at the base, the wife is at the base, and as they grow together in Christ, not only are they growing in Christ and becoming more and more like Christ, but they are growing closer to each other. And so marriage then is a spiritual companionship. So marriage as a covenant is a permanent relationship. It can be a harmonious partnership, and it is a spiritual companionship. And so that's what we as Christians are committing ourselves to. We are recognizing that the only relationship that is really permanent or ought to be permanent is the husband and wife. Unfortunately, in Jamaica, we are children-focused. We are not couples-focused. And because we are so children-focused and not couples-focused, many marriages in Jamaica end after 25 years, between 25 and 30. because by then the children are gone, and so you have what we call emptiness. And you are not spending time working together, bonding, connecting together, and because you are not doing that, you find that you are like total strangers. But you are bonding with someone else. And the someone else that you are bonding with usually is someone you want to get married to afterwards. You want to have your second marriage. The fourth reason why marriages are failing in Jamaica is because of what we call unhealthy need fulfillment. In any successful marriage, the participants will have certain needs fulfilled. There are 5 primary needs that most wives have, and there are 5 primary needs that most husbands have. And when these needs are not being met, the marriage becomes vulnerable. It becomes vulnerable for an affair. It becomes vulnerable for total breakdown. And it is very, very important that we do our best to meet these needs. What are the 5 primary needs for a wife? I would like to suggest that the first need that most wives have is the need for affection. And by affection, women don't just mean sex. They mean to be made to feel valued, to be made to feel cared for, to be made to feel of worth, to be made to feel significant, to be made to feel important in their husband's life, to be made the priority of their husband. They should come second to God. Not second to the job, not second to the children, not second to sports, not even second to church. That's what is important. And that's what makes a woman, a wife, feels that she's a priority. And that's what the affection package is all about. And she has a need for affection. And so if she has a husband who takes her for granted, who doesn't treat her well, who doesn't even tell her that he loves her, and who says, well, why should I tell you I love you? I did that when I got married. If it changed, I would have told you. You know. And so we find, therefore, that she has that kind of husband. And she goes to work and she has a boss who makes her feel like a queen, who treats her well, who makes her feel special and valued and all of that. My brother, you're in trouble. Because a need that seems to be very important to her is not being met by her husband, but somehow someone is making her feel what she would love her husband to make her feel. And so this woman loves the Lord. This woman is a committed Christian, but she has a need that is not being met at home, and therefore she becomes vulnerable. Vulnerable. Are you hearing me? Vulnerable. The second need that most wives have is the need for conversation. From a woman's perspective, there are 3 aspects to conversation. First, there's information. She would like her husband to share with her what happened today. So she says to her husband, darling, what happened today? Nothing. How was your day? All right. And so it becomes for her a disconnect, because she would love for her husband to share with her for even 15 minutes, because if he was able to share with her for 15 minutes, he would have given her a license to share with him for an half an hour or more. Information. Conversation also involves investigation, and that's more an investigation of her feelings. So she's looking sad. She'd like her husband to say, darling, you're looking sad. What's happening? He's looking excited. She says, hey, you're looking excited. Tell me about it. So conversation involves information, investigation, and it also involves understanding. She wants to be understood. My brothers, I want you to hear me say that understanding a woman is a difficult job. It's going to take a lifetime, and that's why marriage is for life. You say to me, Barry, how could you say that? Well, I'm saying that from personal experience. Don't tell my wife I said you. Many years ago, the year was 1977. I'll never forget this. Never will I forget it. The year was 1977, and I was doing a course at the University of Chicago called The Psychology of Women. And after that course, I thought I knew women very well. And a friend of mine told me about a book called What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. And so I bought the book, and I gave the book to Beverly, my wife, and I said, I'd like you to read this book for me, and anything you think I don't understand about you, please underline it. And so she read the book and returned the book to me, and there was an underline on every page. And so I realized that my schooling had just begun. And I realized then that it's going to take a lifetime. And it is taking a lifetime. Understanding. So from a woman's perspective, conversation involves information, investigation of her feelings, and understanding. The third need that most wives have is the need for total trust, openness, and honesty. They need to be able to trust their husbands. They need to know that they don't have to worry about STIs or STDs. They don't have to worry about that because they have a husband who's a one burner. They need to be able to trust their husband. But you know, unfortunately, that's not so. Not even in the church. And so we find, therefore, that trust is a very important thing for wives. Because trust is the foundation on which relationships are built. And when you destroy that, it is extremely difficult to have a very successful relationship. Trust. You know, there are many men whose wife accuse them of lying. And the fact is there are three kinds of liars. There are three kinds of liars. There's a man who lies because he doesn't want to hurt his wife's feelings. Because if she knew the truth, she would be devastated. Then there's another one who lies because he doesn't want to be battered. He doesn't want to be nagged. He likes to save his own skin. And then there's a third liar who's a born liar, who lies when he doesn't even have to lie. But I would like to suggest to you that the risk of lying is a dangerous one. It is far better to tell the truth because, as the Bible tells us, the truth is what sets people free. And so trust is very, very important. The fourth need that most wives have is the need for financial support. They're not asking. Wives are not asking their husbands to earn more than they do. They're not. What they would like for their husbands to be able to do is to contribute to the family needs financially. Because they don't want to feel that they have a husband who is a big son. They want to know that there is a sense in which everyone is contributing. So please, I beg you, they're not asking husbands to necessarily earn more than they do. They're asking, in today's Jamaica, we have to face that reality. They're asking their husbands to contribute, to make a contribution to the needs of the family, to be able to assist and not to be dependent entirely on the wife to carry the financial burden. The fifth need that most wives have is the need for their husbands to be a good father to the children. And being a good father is not just providing. It's being able to give the children time and attention, to be a positive role model for the children, to assist in the kitchen, to not be marginalized, to help with the homework, to go to the PTAs and so on. That's what they would like. Now, I would like to suggest to you, my brothers, when these needs are not being met, it becomes problematic and your wife is vulnerable, very vulnerable. Then there are needs for the husbands. What are these needs? I would like to suggest that the first need that most husbands have is the need for sexual fulfillment. And by sexual fulfillment, what men mean is not that their wife is going to oblige them tonight, or give them a bly, or open shop tonight. What it means, basically, is that their wife is interested in sex as much as they are, and that she will even initiate it some of the times. And what men have told me is that when their wives initiate lovemaking, it has the ability to transform a mundane black and white into living, glorious technicolor. That's what they told me. The second need that most husbands have is the need for companionship, recreational, social, intellectual. The need for their wife to go places with them, the need for their wife to do things with them, the need for their wives to think through issues with them. And if a husband has a wife who is not doing that, and he finds some other female who is going places with him, doing things with him, thinking through issues with him, I would like to suggest that that marriage is in serious trouble. Because that man is vulnerable. Because companionship is crucial to men. Don't let any man fool you and tell you that that's not important. The good Lord told us that that was important. Companionship. The third need that most husbands have is the need for their wife to maintain her attractiveness. It is very difficult for a man who's outside working and meeting all kinds of attractive women to go home to see some wife in some old frock and dragging some old slippers around the place. You need to maintain your attractiveness. You need to make sure your husband come home and he's so excited that he's coming home to you. Because when he comes home, he says, surely heaven come down and glory fill my soul. In just seeing you, right? It's very important. It's very important to go to bed, not wrap up like you're going into some grave or some coffin. Very important. Very important. And so, my brothers and my sisters, when these needs are not being met, we're likely to be in trouble, serious trouble. The fourth need that most husbands have is the need for their wife to be a good domestic manager. Not a domestic helper, a domestic manager. And what does a good manager do? A good manager delegates. So she will delegate to the children, she will delegate to her husband. Because it's very important that we grow up children, we make our children grow up to be domesticated. I did a research at UWI recently where we were looking at a number of the graduates in both the law school and also in medical school, a lot of the females, and we asked them, what is it you're looking for when you leave in your husband? What is it you'd like to know? You know what we found was the number one? A domesticated man. I couldn't believe it. And why is that necessary? It's necessary because when you have two people working and they go out to work and they come back, it is very important that they share in the responsibilities. Because when a woman works hard with her husband, they both work hard, they come home, and he now goes to sit down to read the newspaper, and she now goes to prepare a meal. And the meal is prepared and they're both having it. And he now eats, enjoys the meal and then go to watch the news. And she now cleans up and wash. And then they later on retire and go to bed. And when he's in bed, he reaches over to her and she takes his hands off her and put it on him and roll away from him. She's sending him a message. The message she's sending is, darling, I'm tired. The message he hears is rejection. And he says under his breath, it is women like you who make men go on the street. She's ready to raise a placard to say, me want justice, me want justice. And so we need to understand those dynamics that is taking place. We need to understand. The fifth need that most husbands have is the need for a wife who is not constantly nagging them, who is not constantly criticizing, who is not constantly complaining, but rather who is affirming, who will stroke their ego, who will make them feel larger than life. Because a nagging wife is a real horror, you know. It's like a pipe that is dripping and you want to sleep and all you hear is dip, 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 dip. And so she wants. You know, a husband had a wife who was a real nagger. She nagged a lot. And so he decided that he would stay away from home until she would be asleep, then he comes home. And so one night she noticed, she says to herself, this man is horrible. Him come home so late and wake me up when him come home. I'm not going to bed until him come home. So she waited up for him. And they went to bed. And she started to nag. And he didn't know what to do. He said to her, he said, you know, darling, I'm sorry. Everything you're saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I am wrong, darling. I am wrong. But she still keep nagging him. And so he said, I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to do. I tell you I'm sorry. I tell you I'm wrong, and you're still nagging me. What should I do? She said to him, you haven't told me that I'm right. Winston, I didn't get that one from you. Okay. All right. But that's the problem. So he has a need for his wife to affirm him, to stroke his ego, to make him feel larger than life. I would like to suggest that when these needs are not being met, when the needs of a wife, the needs of a husband, when these needs are not being met, it makes the marriage vulnerable. Vulnerable for an affair, vulnerable for total breakdown. And so we need to understand how important it is to meet our needs, our husband's needs and our wives' needs, if our marriages are going to survive. My brothers and sisters, we had a tremendous opportunity some years ago to do a major research in Jamaica. We wanted to find out what is it that makes marriages last in Jamaica. And we did this research and we looked at marriages in Jamaica, in Barbados, in Trinidad. And we interviewed folks who had been married between 45 and 65 years of marriage. And we found 10 very important things. And I'd like to share them with you. And this book, that's written by Faith Linton and myself, forwarded by Sam Vassell, is a book that shares with you the findings of this research. And so I'd like to share with you what we found. We found 10 things that were crucial if your marriage is going to last. In Amos chapter 3, verse 3, we read, can two walk together except they be agreed? Can two walk together except they be agreed? What we discovered is that one of the most important things is shared values. Similar values, having the same social and religious background. It is extremely important for people to have shared values. Do you know that you can be two Christians but unequally yoked? Did you know that? You can be unequally yoked along doctrinal basis. It is a challenge, for instance, when an Adventist person marries a non-Adventist. It becomes a challenge. Did you know that? And it becomes even a greater challenge when you start having children. Where do they go? Shared values, similar social and religious background, very important. And we found in our research that these couples, their values were the same. They had a similar value system. Their worldview were the same. They had a similar worldview. And so the prophet Amos says in Amos chapter 3, verse 3, can two walk together except they be agreed? Secondly, friendship. Friendship. We discovered was that lasting relationships depend more on I like you than on I love you. Do you know that there are husbands and wives who love each other but don't like each other? This is what we have found out, that friends are people who like each other. Friends are people who like each other. If you want to know who is your husband's best friend or good friend, just ask him to lend you his cell phone and go through the WhatsApp messages and look at who he WhatsApped the most. That's his good friend. Borrow your wife's phone and look at who she WhatsApps the most. That's her good friend. We like to keep in touch with our friends. We like to start off our morning telling them good morning. We like to do that with our friends. Friends are people you like. You like going out with, you like doing things with, you like your friends. And what we found from the research was that these couples were friends. Not only were they friends, they were best of friends. That's what contributed to making their marriages last. Friendship. Thirdly, intimacy. Intimacy involves listening, and listening is the language of love. Happy couples encourage intimacy through praise and mutual reinforcement. I want you to know that there are 5 levels in communication. 5 levels. The first level is called cliché. And at a cliché level, there is no intimacy, there is no bonding. How are you? Fine. What's up? Nothing. Monosyllables. No intimacy or bonding takes place at a cliché level. So if in a marriage, your communication is strictly at a cliché level, you are not experiencing any intimacy in this marriage. The second level of communication is called facts or gossips. So if all you speak about is what you see on social media or what you see on television or what you hear in the news, if that's all as a couple you're speaking about, you are not experiencing intimacy or bonding. Yes, you're sharing facts, you're talking. You can even leave service and talk about the message, but that's a level 2 thing. You are sharing some facts. No intimacy or bonding is taking place. Intimacy and bonding begins at level 3, where you are sharing your opinion. And it is true that sometimes opinion causes you to have conflicts, causes you to have disagreements, but that's healthy in a relationship because you need to be able to connect with each other intellectually. You need to be able to connect to each other with your minds. Your minds need to connect. And so intimacy and bonding begins at level 3, which is the level where we share our opinions. Intimacy and bonding increases at level 4, where we share our feelings with each other. And intimacy and bonding maximizes at level 5, where we experience transparency, where we're totally transparent with each other. And I would like to suggest that if our marriages are going to last, we have to be transparent. Your wife needs to know things about you that nobody else in this world knows. Your husband needs to know things about you that nobody else in this world knows. That's what intimacy is all about. Where I can be truthful and honest and open with my spouse. Because if there's one person who's watching my back, it's going to be my wife. If there's one person who's watching my back, it's going to be my husband. And so one of the things that really become devastating for a wife or a husband is when they hear something about their spouse from outside. They never did hear it from the spouse. It feels like a betrayal. It feels like a betrayal. The fourth thing that we found that helped to make those marriages last was the fact that they had conflicts, they had their fights, but they learned to fight fair. They stayed away from name calling. They didn't berate each other. They didn't say awful things to each other. They fought fairly. So, for instance, a wife burns the dinner, and she seems to burn the dinner quite often. What her husband don't understand is that she's treating him like a god, giving him burnt offering morning, noon, and night. But you know something? You know something? He decides that he's very upset with the dinner being burnt, and he wants her to understand that. But he's going to be kind. So he speaks to her about the dinner being burnt rather than tell her that she's a lousy cook. You see the difference? He focuses on what happens. He doesn't call her names. He stays away from the name calling. And he's probably smart, because if he does that, she might not even burn. She might not give him any more dinner. And so there is absolutely no marriage that is free from conflict. We have conflicts. But we need to know how to handle the conflicts. We need to know how to manage conflicts. We need to know how to communicate effectively. We need to know how to listen and how to challenge. The Bible tells us that we must speak the truth, but we must speak it in love. We must speak it in love. Speak the truth, but speak it in love. And that's how we try to manage our conflict. So we speak to each other, not to hurt each other, but to help each other. That's what it means to speak the truth in love. You're speaking the truth not to hurt, but rather to help. And so you're likely to use I messages rather than a you message in speaking. And so they had conflicts, they had fights, but they fought fairly. The fifth thing was tolerance. Tolerance. Do you know that in a relationship you could have 60% of the relationship being wonderful and 10% awful? But if you spend all your time focusing on the 10% will begin to feel like 90. And the 60 begins to feel like it doesn't even exist. And so what these couples recognized is that they needed to learn tolerance. And how do they do that? What they did, they made what was good, what is good about the relationship, they made it the core of the relationship. And the things that they had difficulty with, they made it the peripheral. They made it the peripheral. And that's how they were able to manage. And that's how they applied tolerance. But the devil is going to make you make what is bad, which although it's 10, going to want you to make it 100. So when you speak with sweeping generalizations and cause more problems than anything else. Tolerance. Tolerance. The sixth thing was passion. Passion. One of the things that surprised us was that we discovered that these people, although gone on in many years, elderly people, quite a few years to be married for 45 to 65 years, one of the things that surprised us was that they still love sex. And they were still interested in sex. And that sex was still one of those things that they don't just dream about or think about, but they also made time to do. You might have heard Winston talk about this couple who lived up in Red Hills. And they sat on a balcony one night overlooking the beautiful city with all the traffic lights, and they were able to look at the star and the moon and so on. And then the wife said to her husband, "Darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon out and the stars shining? You'd have just come beside me and pinched me on my knee." And so he came beside her and pinched her on her knee. And then she says, "Darling, you remember on a night like this with the moon out and the stars shining? You just come beside me and kiss me on my cheek." And so he came and kissed her on her cheek. And so she says, darling, you remember a night like this with the moon out and the stars shining? You just come beside me and give me a big hug. And he came and gave her a big hug. And then she says, darling, you remember a night like this with the moon out and the stars shining? You just come beside me and bite me on my neck. And so he started to walk off and go away from her. And she says, honey, what happened? Did I offend you? What happened? He says, darling, I'm going to get my teeth. You see why Winston is my friend? And so passion. We make sure to keep the relationship going. The seventh thing that they found that was crucial was equality. Equality. I would like to suggest to you that marriage is far more about giving than it is about getting. Let me say that. If there's anything I want you to leave with this morning that you remember that I said, is this. Marriage is far more about giving than it is about getting. Equality. In a marriage, we should never have anybody feeling superior to the other or inferior to the other. We are equal partners. We're equal partners, giving equally to the marriage. And you can tell a good marriage, a great marriage, a wonderful marriage, when you find a couple trying to outgive each other. Trying to outgive each other. And so what they found that their marriages lasted and their marriages were able to survive amidst all the challenges because they saw each other as their equal. Not as somebody who was less than. There was a sense of equality. They made sure they shared as equal as possible. They made sure that they were constantly giving to each other. My brothers and sisters, if we want equality, we need to remember that marriage is about giving. It's not about getting. The eighth thing they found was trust. My brothers and sisters, the feeling of love may wax and wane during a relationship, but trust is a constant. Infidelity is the most devastating betrayal of trust a couple can experience. Successful couples don't take each other for granted, but work constantly, rejuvenating the good feelings for each other. The most satisfied couple are not necessarily couples who might have the greatest of sex, but couples who put their relationship above their children and their career. Couples who recognize the importance of having date nights. Couples who recognize the importance of having nurture nights. The couples who recognize the importance of having times together throughout their marriage. I want you to understand that marriage is like a garden. And if you neglect the garden, weeds take it over. And so we have to spend time. We have to focus on each other. We have to make time for each other. We have to do things with each other. And so a marriage will survive, a marriage will do well if first of all we are committed to God and then committed to each other. So our first commitment should be to God. You remember the triangle? Our first commitment is to God, because commitment serves as the cornerstone of marriage. First, a commitment to God, and then a commitment to each other. And if we're committed to God, we are going to spend a tremendous amount of time praying for each other. We're going to make time to reach out to Him. We're going to talk to Him. We're going to ask Him for help. We're going to seek His guidance. We're going to seek His help during turbulent and challenging times. We are going to. One of my favorite verses in Scripture is set Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. It says, when you pray, enter into your closet and pray to your Father in secret. and your Father in secret will reward you openly. So we're not about impressing anybody. We're not about trying to make people know how good a prayer warrior we are. We're about making God know our hearts. Calling, bawling, begging God. So it's very important. A commitment to God, and then a commitment to each other. And the 10th thing and final was forgiveness. Forgiveness. When you forgive the people who hurt you deeply and unfairly, you perform a miracle that has no equal. Nothing else is the same. Forgiving has its own feel and its own color and its own climax. Different from any other creativity in the entire world. Forgiveness. Do you know what it means to forgive? I would like to suggest to you some things that forgiveness is not. Forgiving is not forgetting. Did you hear that? Forgiving is not forgetting. How can you forgive something you have forgotten? It is because you remember it why you have to forgive it. Forgiving is not forgetting. Excusing is not forgiving. If you keep excusing, you're going to always be excusing. Excusing is not forgiving. Forgiving is not the same as smothering conflict. We Christians are notorious. We like to just put things off and put it under the carpet and hope that it will go. We need to confront people from time to time because they need to hear the truth, and we need to speak it in love. So trying to maintain the peace by not raising any issue is not forgiving. Accepting people is not forgiving them. Forgiving is not tolerance. Forgiving is not trust. I want you to hear me say this loud and clear. You can forgive somebody, but you'd be stupid to trust them. Let me say it again. You must forgive somebody, but you could be stupid to trust them. I have had a lot of challenges with ministers and pastors in Jamaica over the years, because I've tried to assist them and help them to understand that when a couple have serious problems, when a husband beats up his wife or a man beats up his woman, and they come before the altar and kneel down and pray and ask for forgiveness, and you send them back in the same space, I believe it is stupidity. And so what I have challenged them to do was to make sure that, yes, we have forgiveness taking place, because forgiveness is a must. If you don't forgive somebody, you could get sick, you could even get cancer, because you could develop psychosomatic illnesses. And you need to forgive. It is imperative you forgive. But we need to understand that forgiveness doesn't equal to trust. If I have a cashier and she robs me and she steals from me, I am going to forgive her, but I'd be an idiot to keep her handling money. And so what we have done, we have tried to help pastors to understand the importance of putting these two people apart. Because the reason why this man is doing what he's doing is because he needs help. He's sick. And he might need help with anger management. He might need help because he's an insecure human being. He might need help for what various reasons. And until he gets that help, he is not to be allowed to be in the same space with this woman again. We have had pastors who come to me and said to me, Dr. Barry, I should have listened to you because the man killed his wife. I've had that happen 3 times. Pastors come and say that. And so I'm not backing down anymore. Because the first hit is a bad one. The second is even worse. And the fourth could be dangerous. The person needs help. And until they get the help, And how do they? We mustn't force the help on them. They must realize they need it and seek it, because the person who is going to be helped the best is the person who seeks it for themselves. And so forgiveness is not equal to trust. We must forgive and always forgive. But we must recognize that the person who you have forgiven, that person's responsibility is to win back trust, is to win back the trust. Trust is not your responsibility. It's not the victim's responsibility. The victim's responsibility is forgiveness. The perpetrator's responsibility is to earn back the trust. My brothers and sisters, I would like to close by sharing with you 5 truths about forgiveness. 1, forgiveness is an act of the will that puts away resentment or punishment. 2, forgiveness is costly. It cost Jesus his life. It's going to cost you your pride, because you would love to see God zap the person. Forgiveness should be expressed verbally and specifically. Forgiveness is not conditional. You can't say to a person, I will forgive you if you promise me you won't do it again. Nobody can make those promises. Forgiveness is not impossible. I can't forgive you really means I won't forgive you. Ephesians 4:31-32. Get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawlings and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ Jesus has forgiven you. My brothers and sisters, God bless you.